So, good evening, everyone. My name is Helen, and I'm a volunteer here at the Spiritist Society of Melbourne. And today I'm going to be elaborating on the topic of the regenerated. And we will see what this means and how that affects us and also our world. So, as a student of the Spiritist philosophy, what I bring to you today is my understanding on the topic. And it might differ slightly from other people in the group that are participate because we are in different levels of understanding and awareness. But I'll do my very best to be as closely as I can possibly be to what the spirits brought to Kardec in my understanding. But just keep in mind that I'm also a student. So, what does the word regenerated mean? I wonder if anyone knows. So according to Oxford Dictionary, and I'm going to read it, regenerated means having new and more vigorous life. So we're going to see that regenerated applies not only to human beings, but also to planets. So regenerating worlds serve as transition phases between those of probation and happiness. We're going to be covering one of my favorite lessons from the book that I'm going to show you in a second, because it talks about what's happening to our planet, and it explains what a regenerating world is, which is where we are heading towards. And Hamed says that regenerating worlds serve as a transition between worlds that are less evolved and the worlds that are more evolved. So to prepare this study, I based it on this book, Changing Attitudes, dictated by the spirit of Hamed to the medium called Francisco de Espírito Santo Neto. I also used two of the basic books of the Spiritist philosophy, and the Spiritist philosophy has as basis 5 books, but I'm utilizing these two today, which is the Spirit's book and the Gospel according to Spiritism, or as explained by Spiritism. So let's see. In the Spirit's book, question 1019, Kardec was asking the spirits, what would good ever prevail on earth? Because in the current situation, it kind of doesn't seem like good is prevailing. So that was a question that he asked 153 years ago when this book was published and compiled. So the spirits responded that the transformation of the human race has been predicted from the most ancient times, and that they were talking to him, right? You are now approaching the period when it is destined to take place. So if you think that they were responding to Kardec 153 years ago, we are probably in the middle already of this transformation. And religions and philosophies and different beliefs, they have been talking about this shift that will happen in the world. They use different language and they have different understanding of what this shift is. Some don't know exactly what's going to happen. They think that the world is going to end, but actually the world is going to transform from what it is right now. That's what the spirits, the higher spirits, brought us through the Spiritist philosophy. So if we look at the Gospel, chapter 3, item 19, the higher spirits answering as well to Kardec, they said that progress is a law of nature, that all beings of creation, animated or not, are submitted to this law. And the living beings, and as the living beings progress morally, so do the worlds which they live progress materially. So this is important, and I'm going to put a picture here. I hope everyone can see. So if you look at the timeline, on the upper left side, we have the beginning of life on the planet. So as the beings on the planet progressed and evolved, so does the planet. And it might be that each generation can't see any progress, but now if we look back from the beginning and if we follow what happened since the first being, like living being, was on the planet until what we are today, we can see that we evolved, not only in intelligence, but also emotionally and spiritually, and also the world in terms of material comfort and progress. But it might be that different people couldn't see that because in the past there weren't any ways to measure that. But nowadays we can actually have a look back and understand that that's what's happened. So this law of progress applies to everything in nature. And what the gospel brings is, as we evolve, as the beings evolved, and it might be the humans and the animals and even the plants and everything that belongs to nature, that will take our planet to a different level. So if we look back, we started in a very primitive way, and the Spiritist philosophy says that evolution and progress of the worlds as of beings, it's a spectrum. So if we look at the very beginning of our planet, we were in a very primitive world. And although the Spiritist philosophy gives different names to different kinds of planets, it doesn't mean that that is a fact. Because like I said, it's a spectrum. So within the same planet, you will have spirits that are in different levels of development, of spiritual development. So we started as a primitive world, and we slowly progressed to what they call as trials and tribulation. In some books, they say it's atonement world or probation world. And that's when humans moved from instinct and to sensations, and then slowly they moved into feeling and starting to develop emotions. And we are still walking through that feelings and emotions towards our ultimate emotion, which is the underlying force that moves the universe, which is love. So all the beings are moving towards love. So if we look here, so on your left, you can see what a dwelling would look like in the prehistorical phase of our lives. And to your right, you can see where we're heading, which is much more comfort and beauty. Although I love nature and I think that this cave is beautiful, but it's not very comfortable for us to live. So we're slowly moving towards a planet which will accompany our evolution and our progress. And you can find that written in chapter 3 of the Gospel. It's beautiful. It's worth reading. So who are the regenerated, since we were talking about planets? So the regenerated are the beings that will live in a world that's called a regenerating world. And what would be those characteristics? Since we're moving towards that, it's interesting to know where we are and how far we still have to move to really be considered a planet, a regenerating planet. And like I said, on the same planet in the same time, you will have different humans in different levels of development. And you can see that some have more refined tastes and emotions, and they show more respect towards others. and towards themselves, where in other parts of the globe, the other humans are still developing that. So it's not that everyone on the planet is in the same level. One is helping the other. So the regenerated are the people who Hamed will describe in this chapter, which is a very, very beautiful chapter. One of my favorites, like I said. Look at what he said. He said that the regenerated are the ones who have learned how to share this world, always contributing to its maintenance and continuity, realizing that as they give, they receive, maintaining the continuous exchange phenomenon. So the regenerating are the ones who understand that everything is interconnected, that if I do something here, that will have an influence somewhere else. And watching a series on Netflix, I don't know if you had an opportunity to see, called Connected. It's like a documentary where this person goes around the world seeing how things that happens in one part of the planet can affect the other side of the planet. Even though we're completely oblivious to that, we have no idea that that's happening. So the regenerated are people who already understand that everything is interconnected and that we have to give to the planet in order to get from the planet. And watching, since I'm talking about documentaries, I watched that David Attenborough. He was talking about his life. He's 92 years old. And for those who don't know, he had, for all his life, he would go places and he would show the ecosystem, the environment, the animals, how the animals lived, what was happening in different parts of the globe. And in this documentary, he shows that in the beginning of his career, until now that he's 92, he started very young, working. He can see that the human beings have been taking more than they are giving. And that has affected the planet. And if we don't shift very quickly, at some point, we will have to do that by force. He was recommending that we do that by choice instead of by force. It's a really worthwhile documentary to see, because we are really moving towards a planet where people understand that we have to preserve the environment. We have to take care of ourselves and others around us, and also the environment that we live in. So these are my two suggestions that will make a link to what Hamed is saying here, that the regenerated are the ones who can connect the dots and understand that from the micro to the macro, everything is connected in nature. And we have to be aware of that. And we have to learn how to maintain this, what he calls this continuous exchange, giving and getting, in order to be sustainable and to live sustainably. So he continues saying that the regenerated, they have looked inside and discovered the divine within. And because of that, so they don't seek only the exteriority of life. They seek the abundance of their interior life. So, and we can see that in the planet. I don't know if you can see that people are slowly, this is becoming a common knowledge. And one of the things that I really like to observe is when an idea is really common knowledge, because that means that that knowledge or that idea is being consolidated, and we are in a stepping stone of learning things at an even higher level of knowledge. And what do I mean by that? Because, for example, this that I just read, that there's a divine flame or a divine spark within all of us, in the past, that would be something very questionable. And nowadays, more and more you hear people talking about that. That's important to find a win-win situation for everyone. and that meaning is more important than many other things. So when I observe that people from with different ways of expressing themselves are saying the same thing, that gets me really in a good positive mood, because it means that it's widespread and we're building on knowledge. So when in the past, the spiritual masters that walked on this planet, they brought the idea of justice and of love, that was very, very unusual for humanity. So when we were in that phase, it was a very, very unusual idea. But nowadays, we're starting to see that. And there's a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's not a new book, it's an old book. And Stephen Covey, there's a part that he says, and he's talking about leadership development. So it's more like a business kind of leadership development book. But he says that a good leader is one that always finds a win-win solution. And when I heard that, that was probably around maybe 15 years ago. I was so happy, because I could see that something that I had learned more in a religious, spiritual kind of realm was actually infiltrating in the business and how people conducted themselves in their profession. So I could feel that that knowledge was going to be more consolidated, which is very exciting. So the regenerated know that either alone or accompanied, we are all travelers in the universal road, seeking growth and perfection. They are in a journey. They're in the journey into the internal universe inside their souls. So now people more and more realize that we have things to learn that are external to us, but we have to learn about ourselves, how we behave, how we react, why we react in certain ways. And that will make not only our lives easier, but the lives of others around us. And that will influence in how we behave in community and towards our planet. So these are the regenerated. So regenerated are human beings who realize they cannot modify others. The only thing they can and must be transformed are their personal reactions and attitudes and actions related to individuals, places, and setting in their lives. So the people who understood that we can't modify somebody else, there are external things that we can't control, but we can control what's internal to us. And he says that not only we can, but we must transform our personal attitudes and reaction. This really reminded me of Viktor Frankl. And I'm going to get his quotes here. So Viktor Frankl, he was a neurologist, and he survived a concentration camp. So he had several quotes related to how to control how you respond to others. Because he was in an extreme situation in the concentration camp, and he learned that he could, where all the freedoms were taken from him, there was an ultimate freedom, which was the freedom of responding the way he found the most suitable one. And he said that he transcended all the feelings of hatred to respond in a way that he found that was aligned with his internal values, which I thought it was really, really, really beautiful. But before I share what he said, Hamed talking about this, that the human beings realize that they can't modify others. He says that people who are already ready to walk into the new phase of our planet Earth are considered wise people, because from all the learnings that they gathered in the many lives that they live, they are able to put that information together and find new and creative solutions to problems that they might have. And they will have more positive approaches, and that people will have a win-win. It's not about one winning and the other losing. It's about collaborating and everybody winning. Which brings back to what I said, that I felt really happy when I heard Stephen Covey saying that a good leader is one that always seeks a win-win situation. And the regenerated are also seen as wise because they have insights around things. Because they're connecting all the dots, they have some insights that other people might not have, which is really interesting. So what would be the steps we could take according to Hamed in this lesson? What would be the positive steps that we can take right now from today, for example? And he says, like I mentioned in a previous slide, transform our personal attitudes, reactions, and actions related to individual, places, and situations. And that's where it's very strong what Viktor Frankl said, that we can transform our personal attitude. He was facing hunger. He was facing extreme physical and mental abuse, and he still chose to act in a way that was decent. So I'll read one of his quotes that I really find very beautiful. He says that when we're no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Because there are situations where you can change and you can influence, and you should try always to improve the situation where you are, to make the best of it, to transform in a positive kind of environment. But there are some situations like the one that he lived where he could not change. And in that point, in the midst of all that suffering, he identified that although he couldn't change the circumstances around him, he could change himself. So he had to look inside himself. And that's where he really transformed his personal attitudes, reactions, and actions, which is what Hamed brought in this chapter. There's another one that I already kind of spoke, which is the ultimate freedom. That is the attitude of responding in a certain way. Nobody can control how you're going to respond. And you can choose to respond, like to transcend everything that's happening and respond with love and respect to the other person. You don't have to choose differently. You don't have to react. And the last one that I wanted to share with you is that this that he said was very important. And I think all of this is in the book, A Man's Search for Meaning, which I highly recommend to this book as well. So he says that between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And he says this, in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Isn't that beautiful? I think that's absolutely beautiful. Because you have that space between what happens to you and how you respond. And there are some times that you have to respond with energy and proactively, but there are some situations that you actually don't have to do anything except align yourself with your values. If we think of, for example, all the great spirits that walked upon the earth, all the great beings and higher spirits that walked upon the earth, they never responded aggressively. They responded assertively, but never aggressively. So you could really see that they had the control in the response, no matter what was happening externally. So this is his tip number 1, to transform our personal attitudes, reactions, and actions related to individuals, place, and situation. The next one that he covers is use a little time of your day to get to know ourselves, evaluating ideas and sensation in order to understand disconnected feelings, unstable emotions, and contradictory actions. That is well known, and we can find that in different practices and religious practice, is to learn about yourself, know thyself. And that was ancient Greek philosophers that recommended that if you know thyself, you can improve your life and you can improve the life of others around you. So he's suggesting that we find a little bit of time to self-reflect, and it might be after something happened that we reacted in a certain way that wasn't the way that we wanted to react. And then we think what was happening here, and then we'll get to know us better. The other thing that he says is learn not to play many different roles for others as if life were a big theater play. So we have different roles, and we have to step into these roles, but we have to learn to step in and out of the roles and not use those roles as masks, and be ourselves even when we're in that role. What does that mean? What do I mean by that? I mean that we have to be authentic and bring our values when we're in the different roles that we have during the day. But it's important that we learn how to step in and out and not play a certain role just to please people that are around. And finally, he says that we have to learn to take off our masks so we can see ourselves as we really are. We can't improve on something that we don't know exists. We can't change something that we have no idea that's there. And masks might have served us when we first put these masks in place. And by mask is like you put on a persona, a behavior to a certain situation that's around you. But if you hold on to that mask too much, which is very linked to stepping in and out of roles, then that starts to be detrimental to your growth. And Hamed recommends that we take off our masks and we really get to know who we really are so we can progress quicker. So we're almost coming to an end, and he finalizes saying that the regenerated are the ones rehabilitated to the light of eternal truth. They concluded that mistakes will never be a reason to give up or be sad, but instead a stimulus to learn. So since we're progressing into that, we're stepping into that new level of humanity, we have to understand that mistakes are part of success and growth, and never see that. It's easier to say than to do, but never see that as a reason to give up or to be sad or disappointed with ourselves, but actually a stimulus to learn and improve and grow. And finally, he says that people who are in that level that can be considered regenerated, they move on. So he says, so they move on being patient with themselves and others, getting more and more autonomy and discernment of the laws of love that govern the universe. So as they progress, they're patient with themselves, but they are in consistent pace towards understanding the laws of love and being autonomous in the sense that you are doing things that are right just because it's right. So I hope this had brought some value to all of you watching. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.